Okay, let's start part 2. Now in this part, we're going to actually start building our chat. So, if you remember correctly, we had a nice little form that's for a name, but we want to do a little bit more than just ask for a name. Let's ask for a name and a message. And let's make this a little bit long, like that. And let's go ahead and give this a button so that we can push on something. And let's say send. So we can actually run this. And see what it looks like. Hello, Bob. And that's not really all that interesting. But let's see what we do with all that text. So, I'll tell you we were pulling out the name. Let's also pull out the message. And we already know our own name, but just because, let's say, name says message. Let's see how that looks. On our application, go to our URL. Send it. Wow, it says hello people of the world. Okay, that's simple enough. But as soon as it gets there, it stops. What we need is an endless loop. Ah, the endlessness of endless loops. Let's see what this looks like. On our application, we're in the beginning. Bob says hello. Bob says hello back here. Joe says fishies. And it put us back there. That's a step in the right direction. Let's actually keep this name. Instead of redeclaring it every time, let's do name. Let's get some value here. Let's try that. Now what this is going to do, hopefully, is actually remember our name. Bob says fried fish. What's up, Bob? Wonderful. Okay. Now we have our name, but we only keep track of that one message. Let's instead keep track of a whole bunch of messages. Actually, you know what? Let's just put this message onto our list. instead of printing name colon that, let's actually put that right into our message. And let's just serialize it. And let's see what that looks like. So start our application again. Bob says kitties. Bob says boo. Bob says dope. Yeah, but they're all going across, which isn't exactly what I want. So let's actually join these guys with a simple break. Even more is if this was actually below instead of above. Let's see what we can do about that. Now, if you follow our complete logic here, our program starts and we start this loop. Immediately we print out this form, then we get user input, then we print out this list. But what if we were to print out the list here? That would work okay, because when we first start out, our messages will be empty, so it'll still look okay. So then we get an input, process our input, add it to our message list, loop back around, print out our form, then print out our message. That should work. Let's try it. That looks good. And they're going in pretty good order there. If we wanted to, we could reverse that order. That's tempting. Actually, I think I will do that. But first, let's make sure we can do another person. And then we have Joe, and it remembers us. So it looks pretty darn good, but let's reverse the messages. And what else can we do? Now, one thing to note here is this messages array is local to this loop, to this particular instance. So, if I run our application, and over here in my Firefox window, we say our name is Bob, and we say hello, and then over here in my Conqueror window, we say our name is Joe, and we say hiya. Here we have Joe, and here we have a completely separate instance. And they aren't really connected. But we can fix that very, very easily. Instead of messages going here as a local variable in main, let's move it. We're going to put it way up at the top. It's now a global variable. Global variables are shared between all of these instances. So, let's see if it actually works. First we'll go to Firefox, be Bob. Now let's go to our Conqueror instance. We'll be Joe. Notice, it says Bob, hello. Joe says, fishies. notice it hasn't updated, but that's because it's waiting for our input. Let's just send some goop. And there it is. And it just keeps adding. And you can see that this has the latest. What happens if we just hit send? Now if we just hit send, it sends a blank one. That's not really very fun. So for one final thing, let's make it so that if the input message is nothing, then it'll push it. Otherwise, or if the input message is defined, we'll push it. Otherwise it won't. Now you can see why I left that variable in there. Tricky. Okay. Let's go over to start this again. Says hi. Joe says hello. Now, switching back over to Bob, let's just send nothing. Hello, but it didn't insert that other thing. So, if Joe then says something else, then Bob can sit there on his screen and just hit the send button all day to see if there's any updates. So as a quick review of the code, we have our usual declaration, use strict, our global message array, which is shared between all instances, our server running on port 8080, which we start. Every time it gets a new request that it doesn't recognize, it starts up here at main. We have a local name for each individual session, and then an endless loop, also for each individual session. The endless loop first prints the form. It then prints out any messages in reverse order and gets that input, gets the response from the browser. With that, it pulls out the name, updating it, pulls out the message, and if there actually was a message, adds it onto the array with the person's name, and then goes back to looping forever and ever and ever. That concludes part 2.